When all hope failed, the human princess stepped into the fire. Colonies that had once thrived like sparkling gems across the human sectors now flickered like dying lights. Reports from the outer systems spoke of abandoned stations, broken trade routes, and frightened citizens. The humans had always been survivors, but now survival seemed like a fading dream. The council chamber behind her was filled with anxious murmurs. Advisors paced nervously, their faces drawn with worry. Alara could hear fragments of their conversations even without turning around. "There is nothing we can do," one muttered, shaking his head. "The Vorath will consume everything," another whispered, his voice almost trembling. Alara did not turn, she did not need to. She had heard it all before. She had seen fear take root in the hearts of even the strongest leaders, and she knew that if she allowed herself to share that fear, it could spread like wildfire. Humans thrived in the face of challenge, but hope was fragile. If hope died, everything else would follow. "Princess!" A voice broke her thoughts. It was Commander Vera, her most trusted aide and friend. She was a woman of sharp intellect and steadiness, someone who had always been able to ground Alara when her own thoughts swirled too fast. "The latest reports from the Turan colonies, they've fallen completely. We are losing the outer defenses faster than we can reinforce them." Alara nodded slowly, her eyes still on the stars. "I know," she said softly. Her voice carried the weight of responsibility, yet there was no despair in it. "And yet surrender is not an option. Humans do not surrender, not ever." Vera hesitated, then gave a small nod. She had grown accustomed to the stubborn resolve of the princess. Alara did not yet know fear in the same way that others did. She knew it existed, she could feel its presence in the trembling hearts around her, but she had never let it dictate her actions. The Vorath had come like a shadow, slowly and silently. Unlike other alien forces humanity had faced, they did not attack openly at first. They disrupted trade, cut off communications, and spread doubt among the leaders of the galaxy. Systems fell not because of battle, but because hope faltered, and hope had faltered faster than anyone could have imagined. Alara remembered the first time she had seen the Vorath fleet. She had been only 16, standing on this very observation deck, watching a series of strange, dark ships slip silently past the outer rim of the solar system. There had been no warning, no declaration of war. Just the quiet, almost invisible presence of an alien power that seemed to thrive on uncertainty. Now, several years later, the situation had grown dire. The once proud human alliance had fragmented into isolated colonies, each struggling to survive on its own. Resources were scarce. Supplies ran low. The citizens of the outer systems were afraid, and the Vorath, with their cold logic and inscrutable tactics, continued to advance, confident that humanity would eventually give in. Alara turned from the observation deck and walked back toward the council chamber. She moved with a purpose that was impossible to ignore. When she entered the room, conversations stopped. Heads turned and all eyes focused on her. Some faces were filled with hope, but most reflected the same despair she had seen too often. "My friends," she began, her voice calm but commanding, "we are at a turning point. I know the situation is grim, I know the reports are frightening, and I know that fear is spreading. But I ask you now to remember who we are. We are human. We have faced impossible odds before, and we have survived. Not because we were the strongest, not because we had the most advanced technology, but because we never stopped trying. We never stopped fighting, not with weapons, not with armies, but with our minds, our courage, and our creativity." There was silence for a moment. Alara let her words settle. She could feel the weight of the room, the tension of leaders who were unsure if they could believe in her words. Some of them were hesitant, uncertain, but others, especially the younger commanders and scientists, began to lean forward, their curiosity sparked. Alara walked among them, letting her presence and determination speak as loudly as her words. "The Vorath believe they can extinguish our hope," she continued. "They believe they can make us surrender without even a fight, but they have not counted on one thing. Humans do not surrender, and I, as your princess and as a human, will not surrender either. We will find a way, and we will survive, together." An older council member, Chancellor Ryan, cleared his throat. He was a cautious man, a strategist who had spent decades calculating probabilities and risks. "Princess," he said, "I do not doubt your courage, but courage alone will not protect us. Our fleets are spread thin, our technology is aging, and our colonies are vulnerable. We need more than hope, we need a plan that works. Otherwise, we may only delay the inevitable. Alara nodded thoughtfully. You are correct, Chancellor. Hope alone cannot save us, but hope can inspire ingenuity. And ingenuity has always been humanity's greatest weapon. She paused, letting the words sink in. I have a plan, but it will require each of you to trust me, to trust humanity's ability to think beyond the limits of fear. It will require courage, yes, but not just the courage of soldiers. The courage of minds willing to imagine solutions that no one else would dare to try. A murmur of curiosity began to spread among the council. Alara had not yet revealed the details of her plan, but she had ignited a spark. Even in the face of despair, that spark was enough to kindle hope. She turned toward the star map projected in the center of the chamber, the glowing lines showing human colonies and Vorath incursions. Her finger hovered over a cluster of distant systems. We will begin there, she said. We will gather our scientists, engineers, and strategists from across the human colonies. We will combine our knowledge, our creativity, and our courage. And we will create something the Vorath cannot predict, something they cannot counter with brute force or intimidation. A young engineer named Lyra spoke up, her voice tinged with excitement. Princess, are you saying we could use our technology in a way they don't expect? Something entirely new? Alara smiled, a small, confident smile that seemed to brighten the room. Exactly, Lyra. We will use what makes us human, our ability to think, to adapt, to invent under pressure. The Vorath may be powerful, but they are not creative. They do not improvise, and that is where we will find our advantage. The council members exchanged glances, some skeptical, some intrigued. Alara knew that doubt would linger, that fear would not vanish instantly. But she also knew that the moment she could ignite curiosity, imagination, and determination in even a few minds, humanity would begin to rise again. As the council dispersed to begin preparations, Alara lingered for a moment, looking once more at the stars. The Vorath were coming, the shadows were growing, and the galaxy seemed poised on the brink of collapse. But Alara did not waver. She would face whatever came with the full force of her mind and spirit. She would step into the fire, not with anger or hatred, but with courage and ingenuity. She would remind the galaxy why humans survived when all hope seemed lost. Commander Vera joined her quietly. You truly believe this can work, she said softly, almost as if speaking to herself. Alara turned to her friend, her eyes steady. I do, not because I am fearless, not because I know everything will succeed, but because I know humans. And when humans are faced with impossible odds, we rise. The observation deck was silent except for the soft hum of the station systems. Beyond the glass, stars shimmered like distant beacons. Alara's gaze fixed on a bright point in the distance. A human colony still holding on, a small light but a light nonetheless. It was enough to remind her of what she was fighting for. Even in the darkest night, a single light could guide the way. And Alara, the human princess, would ensure that light never went out. She would carry hope into the fire itself, because hope was not just a feeling, it was a force. And she would prove that force to the galaxy, one daring step at a time. And so, even as the Vorath advanced, even as the reports of loss and fear mounted, humanity held its first spark of resistance. Not through weapons, not through fleets, but through the courage, creativity, and unwavering resolve of a princess who refused to let the galaxy surrender. In that quiet observation deck with stars stretching endlessly before her, Alara made a silent promise to every human out there. They would not fall. They would find a way. And when the moment came, she would step into the fire herself. The hum of activity on the space station had changed since Princess Alara had delivered her words to the council. Where there had once been quiet despair and hesitation, now there was a tentative energy, a small spark of curiosity and hope that seemed to hum through the halls. Scientists and engineers moved with purpose, carrying data pads, calculations, and diagrams that promised new possibilities. Alara walked among them, observing without interruption. Her sharp eyes caught a young technician struggling with a power console, and she paused. Need a hand? She asked, her voice calm but warm. The young woman looked up, startled, then smiled nervously. Princess, yes, please. Together they adjusted the settings, rerouted energy flows, and verified calculations. It was simple work for Alara, but it allowed her to stay close to the people who were making her plan real. She wanted them to know she was not a figurehead. She was part of the effort every step of the way. Commander Vera appeared at her side. You can't do everything yourself, she said lightly, though there was an edge of concern in her tone. These engineers and scientists, they need to be independent, they need space to work. Alara smiled, though it was not entirely light. I know, she said. But sometimes they need more than instructions. They need reassurance. If they see me working alongside them, they will believe in what we can achieve. The plan was daring. Humans would attempt something no other species had ever tried: to combine the limited energy resources of the outer colonies into a single, coherent network capable of amplifying and redirecting energy across entire star systems. It was not a weapon. It was a shield, one that relied on human creativity, not brute force, to function. In theory, it could protect the colonies from the Vorath's disruptive influence, giving humanity the breathing space it needed to regroup, reorganize, and survive. In practice, it was unpredictable. The technology was untested, and no human had ever attempted to manage energy on such a scale. Failure could be catastrophic. Alara did not dwell on that possibility. Fear had no place in her mind when there was work to do. Instead, she focused on the problem itself. How could humans harness ingenuity at its purest, most daring level? How could they take their limited resources and turn them into something that even the Vorath could not anticipate? She called a meeting with the leading minds from across the colonies. Holograms flickered to life around the council chamber, showing engineers, scientists, and diplomats who had never met in person. Alara's voice carried through the projection system, steady and calm. We are on the brink, she began. Our colonies are at risk and the Vorath are approaching, but humanity has one advantage that they cannot predict: creativity. The ability to see possibilities where others see only walls, the ability to act when others freeze. Lyra, the young engineer who had spoken up before, leaned forward in her seat. Princess, we understand that, but the problem is, we have never done anything like this before. Even if we combine all our technology, the scale is unprecedented. How do we know it will work? Alara smiled softly. We don't, not yet, but no great human achievement began with certainty. Every invention, every breakthrough started with an idea and a willingness to try. We will test, adjust, and innovate until it works. That is what it means to be human. She paused, letting her words sink in. Across the network, she could see the faces of those who had once been doubtful begin to lean forward, their skepticism giving way to curiosity. Even the most cautious minds began to consider the possibilities. Over the next few days, the station became a hive of activity. Engineers drew complex schematics on translucent boards, while scientists ran simulations of energy flow across hundreds of interconnected systems. Alara moved between them, offering ideas, asking questions, and occasionally demonstrating a calculation herself. She was not the most skilled engineer, but she understood the principles, and her insight often sparked new lines of thought. One evening, she found herself in the central control room with Lyra and Commander Vera. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of energy cores and the occasional beep of a monitor. Lyra's hands moved quickly across a keyboard, bringing up a simulation of the energy network they hoped to build. It's almost ready, Lyra said, her voice filled with both excitement and fear. If we can align the nodes just right, the energy should flow smoothly, creating a field that stabilizes the outer colonies. But it's delicate. Even a small misalignment could. Well, we don't want to think about that. Alara leaned over the display. The lines of energy glowed faintly in the simulation, stretching across distant star systems like threads in a web. Then we must think carefully, she said. Adjust the nodes in small increments, test each change. And remember, the goal is not to control the energy, but to guide it. Let it flow naturally, and we will find balance. Vera nodded, her expression thoughtful. You truly believe humans can do this, that we can turn this into something that works? Alara's gaze swept the glowing web of energy. I do, she said simply, because humans have always done the impossible when faced with no other choice. We will make this work, and the Vorath will not know what hit them. The next day, the first trial began. Engineers activated a single node, directing energy across a small cluster of colonies. Alara stood beside them, watching as the lines of light shifted and pulsed. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly the energy began to move as predicted, flowing along the nodes, stabilizing the distant systems. Cheers erupted among the engineers, but Alara raised her hand to quiet them. This is just the beginning, she reminded them. We must keep testing. Each step must be precise. Each adjustment must be measured. One small mistake now could cost us months of work. Over the following weeks, the trials expanded. More nodes were added, energy flows stretched farther across the colonies, and human ingenuity was tested at every turn. There were setbacks. Simulations failed, circuits overloaded, calculations were off, but each time the team adapted. They learned from mistakes, adjusted strategies, and continued. Alara's presence was a constant, a steady force that reminded them of the reason for their work, the survival of humanity itself. During one particularly tense trial, the energy network nearly collapsed. Nodes overloaded and the simulation flickered, threatening to undo weeks of progress. Lyra's hands shook as she tried to correct the problem, panic rising in her chest. Alara stepped forward calmly. "Breathe," she said. "Step back for a moment. Look at the system as a whole, not just one part. Humans see patterns where others see chaos. That is what will save us." Following Alara's guidance, the engineers adjusted the nodes, redistributed energy flows, and slowly the simulation stabilized. The network hummed with light, a delicate balance achieved through human ingenuity. Lyra smiled, relief washing over her. "We did it," she whispered. Alara nodded. "Yes, but remember the real test is coming. The Vorath will not wait for us to perfect our plan. We must be ready to act when the time comes." As the trials progressed, word of humanity's efforts spread to nearby colonies. Messages arrived from citizens who had almost given up hope, now inspired by the courage and determination of the human engineers and their princess. Alara read them quietly, feeling a warmth she had not allowed herself to experience in weeks. Even in the darkest times, humans found ways to lift each other up, to encourage and to believe. One night, after a long day of adjustments and calculations, Alara sat alone in the observation deck. The stars were bright and cold, stretching endlessly into the void. She allowed herself a moment to reflect. The Vorath were coming, and the galaxy hung in a precarious balance. But the spark of hope, fragile though it was, had begun to grow. Commander Vera appeared silently beside her. "Do you ever worry that it won't be enough?" she asked quietly. Alara shook her head. "No, not really. It is not about certainty. It is about trying. It is about humans standing against the impossible, using what they have in ways no one else would dare to try. That is always enough to start." Vera looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "I hope you are right, Princess." Alara smiled faintly, her gaze still fixed on the distant stars. "I always am, because we are human, and humans do not give up no matter the odds." The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Nodes were tested, simulations refined, and every engineer, scientist, and strategist contributed their unique insight. Mistakes were made, lessons were learned, and progress, slow but steady, became undeniable. Alara's leadership was not authoritarian. She encouraged ideas, nurtured creativity, and allowed the human spirit to flourish. By the time the Vorath fleet was first detected near the outer rim, the energy network was operational on a scale no human had believed possible. Alara walked among the monitors, her calm presence reassuring the anxious operators. "It is time," she said softly. "Time to show the galaxy what humans can do when all hope seems lost." In that moment, the spark of possibility ignited into a flame. Humanity had found its advantage, not through weapons, not through power, but through ingenuity, courage, and determination. The fire of hope, guided by a princess who refused to surrender, was ready to face the shadows of the Vorath. The day had come. After weeks of preparation, testing, and delicate adjustments, the human energy network was ready for its first full-scale operation. The stations were quiet now, save for the soft hum of machinery and the distant thrum of engines preparing the outer colonies for the trial. Princess Alara walked through the control center, her steps steady, her mind clear. She had slept little in recent nights, but exhaustion did not touch her resolve. The Vorath fleet was approaching as expected. Sensors picked up the dark silhouettes gliding through the void, silent yet imposing. They had not attacked directly, yet, but their presence alone was enough to cause panic. Alara knew they were watching, waiting to see if humanity would falter. She also knew that the outcome of this moment would shape the fate of countless lives across the colonies. Alara stopped at the central console, where Lyra and a group of engineers monitored the energy nodes. The lines of light that stretched across the holographic map glowed softly, delicate threads of energy connecting distant star systems. Every node had been carefully calibrated, every energy flow meticulously adjusted. And yet the system depended on one variable that no simulation could fully account for: human adaptability under pressure. "Princess," Lyra said quietly, her voice tinged with nervous excitement, "the network is holding steady. All nodes are aligned. We're ready to begin the full-scale activation whenever you give the command." Alara nodded. "Then we begin." She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She did not hesitate. She would not allow fear to paralyze her. "Activate the network," she instructed. "Guide the energy through all nodes at once. Keep adjustments minimal. Let it flow naturally." The control room lights dimmed slightly as the system came alive. Streams of energy pulsed through the holographic map, traveling along the carefully constructed network. The lines shimmered and bent, weaving through space like a living web. Outside, in the distant colonies, lights flickered as energy fields stabilized, protective bubbles forming to shield the vulnerable stations. Alara's eyes never left the map. She could see subtle imbalances forming, small fluctuations that could grow into larger problems if ignored. She gestured to Lyra and the engineers. "Adjust node 7 by point 3. No, wait, point 2. Yes, that will stabilize the flow." The engineers moved quickly, their hands steady but careful. Even small changes could have massive effects on the network, and Alara knew it. Each correction, each adjustment, required focus and trust in intuition as much as in calculation. That was the essence of what made humans unique: the ability to think in the moment, to improvise under pressure, to find solutions when the rules seemed to fail. Commander Vera stood beside Alara, her expression tense but hopeful. "The Vorath are still on the edge of our sensors," she said softly. "They haven't interfered yet, but they could at any moment." Alara's gaze remained fixed on the pulsing web of energy. "Let them watch," she said quietly. "We are not afraid, and we do not need to be. This is not a battle of force. It is a test of ingenuity." As the network expanded further, a new challenge appeared. One of the outer nodes began to fluctuate unpredictably. Energy surged and dipped, threatening to destabilize the entire system. Lyra's hands flew across her console, attempting to counteract the fluctuations, but nothing seemed to work. Alara moved closer, examining the data. "Stop adjusting for a moment," she instructed calmly. "Step back and observe the pattern. Humans see possibilities where others see chaos. Look for the flow, not the spikes." Lyra hesitated, then did as instructed. Slowly, she began to notice a rhythm in the fluctuations, a subtle pattern that hinted at a solution. "Princess, I think I see it," she whispered. "If we redirect the energy through node 11 for a moment, it should stabilize the rest." "Do it," Alara said. Her voice was steady, commanding, but without panic. The engineers adjusted the node as instructed. Gradually, the fluctuations eased and the network stabilized. The energy pulsed in harmony once more, threads of light weaving a protective lattice across the distant colonies. Alara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "Well done," she said. "See, humans can solve what seems impossible when we trust ourselves." Hours passed as the network expanded further, connecting more colonies and stabilizing energy flows across hundreds of star systems. Alara moved through the control room like a conductor guiding an orchestra, her presence inspiring confidence in everyone around her. The engineers worked tirelessly, but each success, each small victory, renewed their hope and determination. As the energy network reached its peak, a new complication appeared. A sudden surge in one of the core nodes threatened to overload the system entirely. Alara's heart quickened, not with fear, but with focus. She understood that this was the moment where human ingenuity would be tested at its fullest. "Lyra, adjust the core vector by point 5 in the opposite phase," Alara instructed. "No, wait, phase shift point 6. That should absorb the excess energy without destabilizing the rest." The engineers followed her instructions, and for a tense moment, nothing happened. Then the network pulsed, stabilized, and began to flow even more smoothly than before. Alara let out a quiet breath she had not realized she was holding. Vera stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You've done it," she said softly. "The network is working. The colonies are safe, at least for now." Alara nodded, her eyes still on the shimmering lines of energy. "Not just safe," she said. "Stronger, more connected. Humans have shown that even when hope seems lost, we can create solutions that no one else can imagine. This is only the beginning. The Vorath may advance, but they cannot break what humans have built with their minds and courage. Outside the station, the stars seem to shine brighter, as if acknowledging the triumph of human ingenuity. The distant colonies, once fragile and isolated, now hummed with renewed energy. Citizens who had feared the end of their civilization now looked to the skies with curiosity, excitement, and most importantly, hope. Alara allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. She had stepped into the fire, not with weapons or anger, but with determination, creativity, and a willingness to face the unknown. She had shown that humans could rise to any challenge, not through brute strength, but through intelligence, courage, and the spark of innovation that no other species possessed. Hours later, as the immediate trial concluded, Alara gathered her team. Engineers, scientists, and strategists stood before her, tired but exhilarated. Their eyes shone with the realization that they had done something extraordinary, something that no one had believed possible. "You have all done brilliantly," Alara said, her voice carrying both warmth and authority. "What we have achieved today is more than a network of energy flows. It is a proof of what humans can do. When all hope seemed lost, we found a way. Not through fear, not through force, but through our minds, our courage, and our creativity. That is what makes us human. That is what will carry us forward." The room erupted in quiet applause, smiles spreading across exhausted faces. Lyra, still glowing with excitement, approached Alara. "Princess, I never imagined we could do this. I never thought humans could." She trailed off, her eyes shining with awe. Alara placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can, you did, all of you. Humans are capable of more than we realize until we are pushed to the edge. Today, we pushed ourselves. Today, we proved that hope is not something that waits. It is something we create." As the engineers returned to their stations to monitor the network, Alara and Vera stepped onto the observation deck. The Vorath fleet was still distant, their shadow looming in the void, but the humans' web of energy now stretched across the stars like a luminous net. Even the aliens could not ignore the ingenuity of a species that refused to surrender. Vera sighed, her eyes scanning the stars. "Do you think they will attack?" she asked. Alara shook her head. "Perhaps, but it will not matter. We have shown that humans can adapt, innovate, and overcome. That is a power the Vorath cannot predict or control. No fleet, no weapon, no shadow can take that from us." The stars outside seemed to shine in agreement, distant and eternal witnesses to the moment. Alara's gaze lingered on one small light in particular, a human colony that had once seemed doomed, now shining brightly under the protective energy field. It was a reminder of why she had stepped into the fire, why she had refused to surrender when all hope seemed lost. And as she looked across the glowing web of human ingenuity, Alara understood something profound. The fire she had entered was not just a trial. It was a spark that would ignite the spirit of humanity across the galaxy. The Vorath might come. Shadows might stretch across the stars, but humans would continue to rise, to adapt, and to survive, not through fear, not through force, but through the spark of hope and creativity that burned within every human heart. For the first time in many long weeks, Alara allowed herself a smile, not a small one, but a true, bright smile. Humanity had faced the impossible and taken the first step toward triumph. And she, Princess Alara, would continue to lead them, guiding the fire they had created into a beacon for all the galaxy to see. The energy network pulsed once more, steady and strong, and the princess knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more tests of courage and ingenuity, but she also knew that humanity had proven something that could never be taken away. When all hope failed, humans could rise, and she would always be ready to step into the fire with them. The galaxy had begun to change. What had once seemed impossible now pulsed with life, energy, and connection. The human energy network, the creation born of ingenuity, courage, and the determination of Princess Alara, was no longer just a fragile experiment. It had grown into a vast web spanning countless colonies, each one shining like a star in a carefully aligned constellation. The Vorath, who had once seemed unstoppable, paused at the edge of human space, uncertain of how to counter something so different, so unpredictable. Alara walked along the observation deck of the central station, her gaze sweeping across the endless stars. Each distant light represented not only a colony, but a proof of humanity's spirit. She thought back to the days when hope had nearly died, when advisors whispered in fear, when citizens trembled at the thought of the Vorath, and when even the most brilliant minds doubted they could survive. Those moments seemed distant now, replaced by something far stronger, possibility. The control room buzzed with quiet efficiency. Engineers, scientists, and strategists monitored the network, their focus sharp but calm. No longer was there panic. Instead, there was a sense of pride, a shared understanding that they had created something extraordinary together. Alara paused to watch Lyra adjusting a node, her fingers flying across the console with a confidence that was entirely new. "Princess," Vera said, stepping beside her, "they're reporting stable readings across every system. The network is functioning better than we anticipated. The colonies are safe for now, and more than that, they're thriving." Alara nodded, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "It is more than just safety," she said. "It is resilience. Humans are not simply surviving, they are creating, adapting, growing. That is the gift of our ingenuity." The first ripple of the network had been a test, a single pulse of energy through a handful of colonies. But now, the full network flowed in a complex, self-regulating pattern. Energy moved across star systems like the pulse of a living organism, stabilizing environments, redirecting resources, and ensuring that no single point became vulnerable. The Vorath had underestimated the humans' capacity for creativity and adaptability, and that mistake had given humanity the advantage it needed. Reports began to arrive from colonies once on the brink of despair. Messages flowed into the station, each one more uplifting than the last. Citizens who had feared extinction now described bustling communities, renewed communication lines, and thriving trade routes. They spoke of neighbors working together, of children learning in safe classrooms, and of a shared determination to rebuild what had been broken. Even in the face of the Vorath, humans were not only surviving, they were growing stronger. Alara felt a deep warmth in her chest. This was why she had chosen to step into the fire herself. Not to prove her own courage, but to inspire others, to show humanity what it was capable of when it refused to surrender. She had led not with threats or demands, but with trust, guidance, and the quiet insistence that humans could rise to any challenge. Yet even as the network stabilized, Alara knew the work was not finished. The Vorath were patient and the galaxy was vast. Challenges would arise that no simulation could predict. New problems would test human ingenuity in ways that required courage, creativity, and adaptation. She turned to the holographic map before her, watching the energy lines pulse like veins of light across the galaxy. Each line represented a human effort, a spark of thought, a moment of courage. "Princess," Lyra said, approaching with a data pad, "there's a pattern in the readings we didn't notice before. The energy network is beginning to self-regulate. It's almost as if it's learning from the flows, adapting without manual adjustments." Alara's eyes widened slightly, a spark of wonder in them. "Learning from itself," she murmured. "It's remarkable. The network is becoming more than we imagined. Humans set it in motion, but it is beginning to evolve, to anticipate challenges before they arise." Vera placed a hand on her shoulder. "It seems your faith in humanity was not misplaced, Princess," she said softly. "We created something extraordinary because we believed we could." Alara smiled, her gaze returning to the stars. "It is not about faith alone, it is about action. Hope is nothing if it is not followed by effort. We acted, we adapted. We dared to step into the fire when all hope seemed lost." Meanwhile, the Vorath watched silently. They had approached human space expecting easy victories, expecting to exploit fear and uncertainty. Instead, they encountered something entirely new. A species that thrived on creativity, that turned desperation into ingenuity, and that refused to succumb to despair. The Vorath were capable of strategy and logic, but they could not anticipate the unpredictability of human thought, the spark of imagination that had guided Alara and her people. In one of the quieter corners of the station, Alara convened a meeting with her closest advisors. The atmosphere was far different from the tense, fearful days of the council sessions. Here, they spoke not of panic or loss, but of expansion, innovation, and the future. "Now that the network is functional," Alara said, "we have the opportunity to extend it, to connect more systems, and to ensure that every colony can benefit. But we must also prepare for challenges we cannot yet see. Humans have survived because we adapt. That must continue. Our ingenuity will be our shield, and our courage will be our guide. One of the older engineers, a man who had seen the rise and fall of many colonies, nodded thoughtfully. It is extraordinary, Princess. We never imagined humans could do something like this. You have inspired us all. Alara shook her head slightly. It is not just me, it is all of you, every person who contributed, every mind that dared to think beyond the obvious. That is what saved humanity. I only led the way. The fire we stepped into was one we all shared. Days passed, and the energy network continued to grow. The protective fields around each colony expanded, strengthened, and adapted. Communities once isolated now communicated freely, shared resources, and rebuilt their lives with newfound confidence. Humans were no longer struggling merely to survive. They were thriving. Their ingenuity had created a safety net that allowed creativity, growth, and exploration to flourish. Alara often spent her evenings on the observation deck, watching the soft glow of the colonies and the energy network that connected them. She thought of the countless lives that had been saved, the innovation sparked, and the courage demonstrated by ordinary humans in extraordinary times. She thought of the engineers, scientists, and citizens who had dared to hope, and she felt a profound sense of pride and gratitude. "Princess," Vera said one evening, joining her in silence, "look at what we've done. You led us when all hope seemed lost. And now look at the galaxy." Alara's eyes followed the soft lines of the energy network, connecting dots of light across the void. "This is only the beginning," she said, "but it shows what humans can do. When others would give up, we act. When others see only darkness, we find the light. That is why we survive, why we thrive, and why we will continue to rise no matter the odds." The Vorath remained in the distance, observing, unable to disrupt or predict the humans' next moves. They had learned something fundamental, that humanity was not a species to be defeated by intimidation or strategy alone. Creativity, courage, and the ability to adapt made humans unpredictable, and that unpredictability was an advantage no alien force could counter. As Alara looked at the glowing web of connected colonies, she realized something profound. The fire she had stepped into was not a single moment of courage or daring. It was a living, growing force, created by the combined efforts of countless humans who refused to surrender. It was hope made tangible, ingenuity made visible, and humanity's spirit made real. Messages from the colonies continued to pour in. Citizens shared stories of collaboration, innovation, and small triumphs that might have seemed insignificant alone, but together created a wave of progress and renewal. Children once afraid of the shadows now played beneath safe lights. Artists and inventors found inspiration in the stability of their communities, and leaders of other species began to watch humanity with a mixture of respect and admiration. Alara knew that her role was not over. There would be more challenges, more tests of ingenuity and courage. But she also knew that humans had proven something fundamental, that when all hope fails, they do not despair, they rise. And as long as humans dared to step into the fire, no shadow could extinguish their light. On one quiet evening, she stood alone on the observation deck, staring at a small cluster of distant stars. One of them represented a tiny colony that had been nearly lost, now thriving under the protective glow of the network. Alara thought of every person who had contributed to this achievement, every mind that had refused to be defeated by fear. She understood with a deep certainty that humanity's greatest strength was not in their technology or numbers, but in their courage, creativity, and indomitable will. A soft voice broke her reverie. "Princess," Vera said gently, stepping beside her, "do you ever think about what will come next?" Alara smiled faintly, a calm determination in her eyes. "Always," she said, "but I do not fear it. Whatever challenges arise, humans will face them. We have stepped into the fire once, and we will do so again every time it is needed. That is who we are." The stars outside seemed to glow a little brighter, as if reflecting the spark within humanity itself. And in that quiet moment, Princess Alara understood the truth of what she had always known. When all hope failed, humans would not falter. They would rise. They would create. And she, their princess, would continue to step into the fire, guiding the spark that would light the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had survived. Humanity had grown stronger. Humanity had shown the galaxy that courage, ingenuity, and hope could achieve what no force, no shadow, and no fear could ever destroy. And as the soft hum of the energy network pulsed beneath her feet, Alara allowed herself a smile not of triumph alone, but of confidence, pride, and unwavering faith in the human spirit. When all hope failed, the human princess stepped into the fire,